think about Transformers, you might think back to a childhood cartoon and Optimus Prime, but I think about Rod Richard. Rod has been a transformer for years, helping people to transform their body, mind, and spirit. And he now uses that transformer energy to help dads be the best versions of themselves through Forfeit Fatherhood. We're going to talk through 4 pillars today: faith, family, finance, and fitness, with our guest, Rod Richard. Rod, it's good to talk to a real life transformer.
Man, I've never been Optimus Prime before. But I like that. Man.
I almost went Megatron. I didn't know if you would rather Megatron or Optimus Prime.
Look, I'll take all of it. Yeah. I'll be Bumblebee if you need me to. Like, yeah, that was
man, that's some good Transformers knowledge.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Oh man, I'm so pumped to have you on the show and talk to you, man. You're out inspiring dads to be the best versions of themselves, and I would love to hear a little bit of that journey, because like I said in the intro, you've been transforming through, and I'll let you go through the history, but all throughout the people's lives. I'd love to hear that story of how that happened at the beginning, focusing maybe more on the strength and conditioning side, and then how that's now been focused in towards dads.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned it. I'm a strength and conditioning coach by trade. That's what I do, I would say, for a living, or have done for a living. It's not necessarily what I do for a living anymore, but it's a part of it. So I got my CSCS, and then I start working at a high school. And then I got into the private sector, working at a gym part-time. So I was doing both of those things. The part-time work at the gym kind of allowed me to start working with some professional athletes. I was working with some baseball players at the time. And that kind of word of mouth got me an opportunity with the New York Mets. Wow. I was working with the Mets for 2 seasons in minor leagues, and then we got pregnant, and this is where like everything changes, right?
Yeah.
So this is what I would call like my matrix moment.
Well, I just love the transition of you could, like, that was the moment. And I do want to hear about the matrix moment, because that's, everything changes, and you probably, like, now you see everything, like everything leading up to that, built to that. So I do have a question about that. So when you'll go into the matrix moment, but it was like you were on this path, and here I go, and then everything gets disrupted, right? In a good way, but certainly in you're working up the ranks in professional baseball and strength conditioning, and probably saw a future for yourself at that time of like what it could become.
Yeah.
So take us to that moment.
So I would say I was fast tracking in that Mets organization, partly because of my own merit, and then also we had some turnover. So I came in the rookie ball. That was my first season. I was strength conditioning coach of the year in my league.
Wow.
And then I got some other, because when you do something like that, the organization gives you some pats on the back, and they give you some opportunities. So they wanted to send me to the Dominican for the fall league, and they wanted to do a couple of other things that kind of like promote you, fast track you. So I went from rookie, and I was supposed to go into AA the following season, and then AAA, because our AAA guy actually ended up retiring. So that will put me one level below being in the big leagues in a season and a half. And what's crazy is the guy who replaced me, Dustin Clark, is actually still the big league strength guy. So he came in and replaced me when I decided to leave, and that's when I'll get to the matrix moment. But I decided to leave.
Wow! And
he came in and picked up where I left off, and then the following season they fired the big league guy and promoted him.
Does he send you Christmas cards every year and say, thank you for getting pregnant? Like, thanks for getting out of there.
It's funny.
Getting out of my way.
I used to talk to him a lot when I first left, just, normal business stuff like, hey, certain guys have this thing going on, or different ways to kind of communicate to some of the guys and things like that. But I haven't talked to him in a few years. A few emails we kind of passed back and forth, but I haven't talked to him in a while. But he did it on his own, right? He came in and did a great job, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
He would have made it, whether it was because it's been almost 12 years now that he's been there, so he's obviously the guy getting the job done, right? So it had nothing to
doing something right.
Yeah. He was gonna make it happen either way. I just stepped out of the way and made it a little easier. But yeah.
So you had so the news comes and it's the Matrix moment. Tell us about what that Matrix moment was like.
Yeah, so I come, the season finishes, I get home, the minor league season ends. So I come home,
Yeah.
and then me and my wife, we go to visit my family for Thanksgiving, and then they live in the Bay Area. So from the Bay Area, we go to Tahoe just to spend some time together. So we're in Lake Tahoe, and she's not feeling well. And I'm, you're sick. You've been sick before, whatever. Like she's like, yeah, my stomach's not feeling well, and so she's like, at this point, I think we had been together probably 10 years. So she's like, yeah, I don't think it's that. You know what? Let's get a pregnancy test. And I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. Let's. We've been down this road before. It's no worries. Like this has happened, right? Oh yeah, sure, whatever. Let's go get one. And so we get back to the room, and she goes to the bathroom, and she's in there longer than normal, but peeing on a stick. It's got to be complicated, right? I can't imagine what that's like.
Exactly.
But then she comes out, she opens the door, and she just stares at me. She doesn't say anything right away. But then this is where I say, like the Matrix moment, where time slows down and the bullets are like kind of Neo can see the bullets coming at him and he's grabbing them. And as the words are coming out of her mouth, and she says, you're going to be a dad. I think everything, like I say, in that moment slowed down. And I knew immediately that I was being introduced to my purpose, right? Because at that point, or up until that point, I had been pursuing a career, right? My identity was wrapped up in my career. I was going to be a strength and conditioning coach. I was in Major League Baseball, and this is what I was doing. And when people asked me who I was, that's why I answered, right? I was a strength and conditioning coach, right? I didn't really talk about anything personal because I had adopted that as who I am. And so I was kind of chasing a career. And then when I heard I was going to be a dad, like that was it. I'm a father. Like I don't answer that question anymore without saying, I'm a father. Like who are you? I'm a father. Like it just immediately, it's kind of stopped me in my tracks. And so I took that news. We spent the rest of the time there. We get back home, and I immediately call my coordinator. Like when we get back to our home in Southern California, I call my coordinator and I'm like, hey, I'm not coming back. Not even the discussion. That was like the first thing I said to him. It's like, I'm not coming back this year. And he's obviously like, what do you mean? What's going on? And I told him my wife was pregnant and I'm going to be staying home. Like I'm just not coming back. And so they offered me some incentives to come back. Obviously they don't want to lose you especially at that time of the year. They don't want to lose a guy. But
yeah,
I just kind of let him know, hold on real quick. My battery's about to die. Let him know that this was more important for me, and he was actually really understanding. And I like to say that he was one of my first fatherhood mentors, because he had a few kids of his own, and eventually it got to a point where I turned down a couple of things, and he was like, if I had the chance to do it again, I would have been there. Right, I would have been there for my kid's birth, because he was a player in the major leagues, and he missed out on I think his first or second daughter. He didn't have the opportunity to be there because they were traveling, right? And I just couldn't imagine myself not being there for the doctor visits, not being there for birth, right? At that time, it was like Skype. I couldn't imagine a Skype call to see my kid for the first time, So, I let him know that I wasn't coming back. My wife was not too happy about that, because you're like, well, hey, we're having a kid. You can't not have a job. Like
Oh, so okay, that's interesting. I was going to ask about that. So I was going to ask if she had this moment of like appreciation and she said, no. What, like, how are we going to make money? So she wasn't greatly appreciative of you being there.
Right. Well, because prior to that season starting, we had just bought our first house, and now we're talking about 6 months later. I'm saying I'm quitting my job, and we got a baby on the way. So, so there was like this kind of back and forth of, maybe you should stay and we'll figure it out. And maybe we move down to Florida, or we'll move to wherever you're at this year. And, I didn't see myself uprooting my entire life and having her give up her career, us give up our house to follow me around while I followed a team, when the core of my being at that point, like I said, in my moment, was being a father. Like I needed to be there, not the other way around. So eventually she came around, and they were like, the Mets, because you're in a contract, they're really cool about it. Like they finished paying me out through the rest of the year, gave me some time to finish looking for what I was going to do next. So that was nice. I don't
Mm.
recommend just quitting a job without any kind of safety net, but honestly, I quit without knowing that was going to happen, right? Like I didn't know that they were going to
Yeah.
continue to honor the contract. I didn't know that they were going to pay me out, whatever extra bonuses that I had from the previous season. Like they did all of this stuff just kind of out of the kindness of their heart, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but I was ready to just go all in on family regardless. And I knew that I was just going to figure out whatever needed to happen next. So
What do you think it was? Did you like, had you always looked towards like being a dad someday, or what was it that was such an immediate spark? Like, did you have like great examples of fatherhood coming up, or what was it or was it the other side where you said like, no, I really need to be an example that I didn't see from other people around me? Like, what was it about being a father that was so important in that moment?
you know what? I don't know. It was one of those things. There was like
Hmm.
it was an epiphany moment, but I can't point to why it was
Yeah.
so moving for me, right? Like my dad,
Hmm.
my dad was out of my life for a few years when I was young. Him and my mom kind of went through their thing and they separated, and he had some personal issues that he had to deal with. So for a couple years he was gone, and then when he came back, they had split custody or joint custody or whatever. So I got to see him
Yeah.
in the summer and every other weekend. And then as I started playing sports, my weekends turned into games and practices, which meant I couldn't
Yeah.
necessarily go with him because I had to go to games and I had practices the next day. And they lived in two different cities, and so it made that tough. Um, so he was there. He was a good dad. Like I wouldn't say that he wasn't a good dad. He was a great dad. He's a great dad now, but he wasn't there as
Yeah.
often, right? And
Right.
then my stepdad, so my mom remarried a couple years after they divorced. My stepdad, I always say, was there, but he wasn't present because
Huh.
my mom got injured on the job and was on permanent disability, and so he had to work to take care of everything. So he worked. I don't think there was a week in his life or in our lives together where he didn't work 60 plus hours. Like he worked overtime all the time. And so
Wow.
I saw him, maybe every once in a while for dinner, or, I saw him kind of in passing. Like I'd be going to school and he'd be coming in from working the graveyard shift, or he would be going out and I would be coming
Hmm.
home. And so it was really in passing. And so I never really had a great relationship with him. It wasn't negative in any way. There was no reason for it to be negative, but
Yeah.
we just didn't have a relationship. Like he was the man of the house, but he wasn't in the house because he was out taking care of
Yeah.
the bills. And so like I don't look at fatherhood and say, well, I didn't have a dad or my dad wasn't there, because I did have a dad. He just wasn't able to be in the house as much. And then I did have a physical
Yeah.
dad in the house, but he wasn't there emotionally enough. And neither one of those things, I think, pushed me to be super dad or what I'm trying to be now. I think that just I felt it. It was like a tugging on my heart,
Yeah.
and it was just like an emotional push to like, oh, this is it. It was like one of those
Hmm.
aha moments, but I wasn't really searching for anything, which is really weird. It was just like it happened
Yeah.
and I was ready for it.
Man, that's so interesting. Almost, it's as you describe your dad and your stepdad. It's almost like you. It feels to me like you've been able to take the pieces of them that were great. Your stepdad, great provider when you were with your dad, like fully present, like loved you, and then also fill in those gaps too of what,
Mhm.
like, okay, here are some missing pieces. But you're doing all of that. You're taking two different examples and then combining it into one, and yourself, who's which this falls in the transformer, like things coming together, right? Like everything coming together to become something greater, um, which is really neat. And then as you're and you have two children, right?
Two daughters, yeah.
Two daughters. And so what was those for those maybe those young dads listening right now? Like what was your like real, again, we're all learning. I actually watched a video you just put on your Instagram of that clip from the show where the guy's in the store and just like, what the heck do I do as a dad? Like I have no idea what to do, basically.
Yeah.
And none of us are really prepared at that point. So at those really, really young ages, maybe especially with your first daughter, what was your real goal in those moments? They can't communicate with you, but what was your kind of intention and maybe even advice to the young dads out there who don't have all the answers, don't really know what to do? What would be your advice to those young dads?
You know what? It's in those early parts of your kid's life, none of us really have the answers. And it's kind of like, because everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? There's some parallels.
Yeah.
We all kind of share some similar experiences. Nobody sleeps and baby cries and you don't know what to do and all those things. But I think you kind of find your way, right? You find kind of how you fit in. And I tell guys all the time, it's kind of like, I try to like liken it to sports, right? It's like when that first kid comes out, you're like a backup, right? Like mom's a superstar, right? You're a role player,
That's right. That's
right?
so
Like
right.
you're a
Yeah.
role player. You just need to be there to maybe wipe her brow, get her some water. You know what I mean? Like you, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't really have a
That's so
star. You
right.
don't have a
Yes.
star role, but when you get a chance, right? When coach puts you in the game, you got to put up some quality
Mm.
minutes, right? You got to get in there and make sure you're swaddling right. You got to get that bottle or whatever it is, whatever position you have to play. You got to get in there and be a great role player. And
Uh,
gradually, as your child grows and gets older, you have opportunities to be the star, right? You have opportunities to show up in
mm.
quote unquote big moments, but you just have to understand your role. In the beginning, it's very, very much about mom and baby, right? And you just have to be really good about supporting that relationship, because you
Yeah.
being there and supporting her helps you be in a position to show up when something goes on, right? Like you may need to get up in the middle of the night to go get the baby just to bring her in or him in,
Yeah.
so mom can breastfeed. And just that little bit of support goes a long way, one, in your relationship with the kid, because instead of mom coming to get them every time they cry, dad shows up sometimes. And like, okay, so if I
Mm.
need something, dad will come get me. Cool. So you're starting to build that bond. And yeah, you're not necessarily the one feeding them, but you are, they understand that you're a chain in the link, right? Like you are, sorry, a link in the chain, like you have some
Yeah.
importance.
Right.
Um, so I think for young dads, especially, or new dads, just get in where you fit in. Like find opportunities to be a great support, to be a great role player, because that's how you learn and grow and build connection between your partner and your kid.
Man, I've never heard anybody put it right. And I've never heard anybody put it that way. And it does. It's actually a perfect parallel with your story of, hey, I'm going to be great at special teams these first couple years. And then when you've been good at special teams, all of a sudden you're a starter your junior year. It takes a little bit of time. But I think a lot of dads, they're probably so absent that, they're off playing golf or something like that. Like they're not present. And so then you're not actually able to ever get in that point of trust, or you try to overstep your role and take over where mom should be taken on, and that just leads to some pretty significant discord in the marriage and doesn't end well for them. I want to talk real quick a bit. Your daughters are how old now?
10 and 8.
So how are you managing as an athlete? Like how are you managing sports with them? That's a big question we get from a lot of people. Is like the best role as a parent who has an athletic background and who has kids in sports, pushing hard enough, too hard, or or not trying to impose your own stuff on them.
Yeah, man, I walk a very fine line, right? Because both my daughters play softball. They play other. My youngest
Hmm.
plays water polo as well. My oldest
Wow.
is just a softball player right now, but she's got some skill and some other things. She just only likes softball. Here's the
Hmm.
catch though, is in my strength conditioning in the last 10 years, the company that I work for and the company I work for now, I have had the ability of training some of the best softball players in the world, like by far. Like
Hmm.
I can run down a list of girls that have played in college, Olympic teams, gold medalists, all these things, right? Some of the best players in the country still to this day. And so that puts me in a weird spot because I know what it takes in order to be really successful in that particular sport. Now, I don't play softball. I've never played softball. I had one season where I coached some 6U softball and we won a championship. But I'm not a coach, right? I don't coach softball. But
Right.
because of that, like when I'm with my daughters and they're just getting into it, I walk this fine line of like pushing them to what I know they need to do because I've been in this world. And then also like letting them learn to love the game. So like as a coach,
Yeah.
I know that they have to nurture and love the game in order for them to want to put in the work that I know they need to put in. But sometimes I get caught in putting the cart before the horse. Like look, we need to be outside, fielding 100 balls. You need to get 200 swings. Like, we need to go into the gym and we should be working out and we need to do some running and all these things that I know need to happen. I think ultimately, though, for guys who have kids in sports who also have sports backgrounds, is you have to let them fall in love with the process of it, right? Because I think we all love the game, right? We love the wins and the losses, or maybe not the losses, but at least the playing, the competitive part of it. But you have to allow them to fall in love with the process, because that's where it's actually going to happen, right? I think a lot of times we force the process on them. And this is where I have to kind of bridle myself sometimes, is because I know what it takes. Like, I'm like, all right, well, actually, it's funny. I just talked to my daughters this morning. They have their new season's coming up, so they have assessments coming up this weekend. We've been traveling for the last 3 weeks, so we might have played catch twice, and that's it, right? No hitting. My oldest daughter's a pitcher. We haven't worked on any arm mechanics, no pitching, nothing. And so we have assessments on Saturday, and I'm like, hey, girls, you know what? I'm gonna tell your coaches that we're gonna assess next week, right? Because you have two options: you can assess this week or next week. And typically, I like to assess on the first one, because if it doesn't go well, we can come back for the second one. But I'm like, look, I am not gonna push you guys to go out there and kill yourselves on this Saturday. Like, I know we haven't done what we need to do. I'm gonna give you some time, and we're gonna work together to make sure that you're prepared. Now, the coach in me is screaming at the dad in me, like, bro, what are you doing? Like, look, this is just what it takes. They're going to have to get it done. They're going to have to figure it out. Like, if they don't want it, they don't want it. Like, I'm having this, there's like, how they say, like in the cartoons, you have like the angel and the demon on your shoulder. Like, they're screaming across my face at each other. And I'm trying to be like compassionate and understanding. And on one side, like, as a coach, I'm like, well, they better figure it out, man. If they don't get it done, they don't really want it.
Right.
And they should have been practicing while we were traveling. Like, that's on them, and so there's
found somewhere in Singapore to throw.
Yeah. There's this ongoing struggle. But I'm learning to let them love it, because I know with a lot of kids, especially, they burn out when they don't enjoy the process of it. Right.
Yeah.
When it's just mom and dad forcing them to do things, they don't make it past. Some of them don't make it to high school. Right. When mom and dad are forcing you to do it, especially in sports in Southern California, like, well, really almost all of them now, because it's pretty much year round. Like, there's no real off season. If you aren't wanting to do it on your own and somebody's forcing you, you get no breaks. You get no time off. There's no rest. There's no recovery. You're going all season. You are going to burn out. Right. If you don't enjoy it, you're going to burn out. And I don't want that for them. And so I'm trying to, like I said, ride that fine line where it's like, I know you've got talent. I can see it, right? I see flashes of it, but I can't make you do it. You have to want to do it.
That whole David Pollack was on our podcast, and he said he was talking about that with kids in sports, and he said everybody has so much grind until they grind out. Like, you will just grind out, and what probably happens is you damage a relationship in the interim with between yourself and your child. But it's really hard, especially in your position, knowing what it takes. Like, you do have the answers there. You can tell them exactly, and you see that little flash and how to develop that, but it's that is challenging, because you'll damage you can possibly damage a relationship in the meantime. And so it's that's a hard one. It really is. It's such a balance of what to do. But I guess and then sometimes, like, I heard someone talking the other day about how he really gets on to his 5-year-old and soccer, like, it's really coaching him. And in my mind, I'm like, and I remember that, by the way, when my kids were 5 and how I was, jumping, getting on them and pushing them in sports. But hearing somebody else say, like, bro, your kid's 5, like, you're fine. Like, back off a little bit. Like, everything's okay. But then I superimpose that on my son's 15, and I'm going to look back in a few years and be like, he was just 15. Like, he was fine. Like scouts weren't in this tennis match. Like, at 15, like, everything was okay. But that's hard. I mean, I bring that up just because I battle it myself and how to manage those things, being dad or coach. But I'm gonna picture that angel and demon on your shoulders next time I'm having that internal dialogue.
Yeah. And that's why I tell my daughters, like, I don't. They want me to coach them, right? They want me to coach their teams, because I coach the team, and I always tell them I'll be an assistant coach, but I don't want to be the head coach. And the reason I don't want to be the head coach is
Yeah.
not because I don't want to deal with other parents, it's because I don't want to deal with your parent, right? Like I don't want to deal with the struggle of being your coach and your dad, because coach dad is going to make you go sit down sometimes. Like coach dad is going to pull you out the game.
Yeah.
Coach dad is going to have to get on you, and then dad is going to have to ride home with you afterwards. You know what I mean? Like like I gotta live with you the next couple of days after that
Yes.
practice where I made you guys do extra running because something happened,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want that. I don't want that relationship, because I think they're at a point now where once that one season when I coached them, they didn't separate very well, right? They thought like
Yeah.
dad was mad at us and our coach was coaching us. You
Wow.
know what I mean? And I could tell, like when we got
Yes.
home, there was like this weird like tension between
Mm.
not between me, but it was almost like they didn't know how to disconnect, right? Like I'm very
Yeah.
good at like separating the message from the messenger, right? They aren't there yet,
Right.
right? And so even now when I'm helping them or
Yeah.
coaching them, like when they come to my gym, I don't like to coach the class they're in. I don't want to coach the class they're in. I'll say certain things to them, and I'll do maybe some one-on-one instruction stuff with them. But if they're in a group setting, I always ask one of the coaches, please take this group. Like I just tell me what happened
Yeah.
afterwards. I don't even want to look. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I don't want them to feel like dad is judging them when I'm coaching them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're
100%.
they're not that they're fragile, because kids are really resilient, but I don't want all the
Mm-hmm.
energy that I'm putting into building this father-daughter relationship to be damaged because coach dad,
Mm.
because I know who I am as a coach. I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I'm a good coach, right? But I can be intense. And because like I said, I
Yeah.
know what it takes to get where you eventually want to go. And it's not going to be as compassionate sometimes. It's not going to be
Yeah.
caring about your feelings at times. Like I'm not going, like, listen, look, I don't ever say throw like a girl, run like a girl, right? Like, because I work with a lot of girls. I'm like, you're an athlete. When you come in this room, like when you come into this building, you're
Yeah.
an athlete. I don't care if you're a 300-pound NFL lineman or a 125-pound softball player or a 110-pound taekwondo athlete. Like you're an athlete, period. I'm going to talk to you,
Yeah.
treat you like an athlete. Outside of it, when we're not in our training sessions, we have a good time, we talk, we communicate, we have a good relationship. But when the session starts, you're all equal. And I'm going to require of you, because there's a
Yeah.
standard that you have to uphold, whether you're my kid or not. There's a
Mm.
standard that you have to uphold. And sometimes that is tough for them to manage, right? It's like, why is he treating us like
Sure.
this, right? Why is he talking to us like this? I'm like,
Mm.
bro, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the athlete. Like after the class, you could be whoever you want to be. But right now, I'm talking to the athlete in you. And this is what I need from the athlete in you.
Man, I love that. So I want to get really practical, Rod. I want to get into the 4 pillars. And before we jump into that, I want to hear a little bit about how did the concept of forfeit fatherhood come up? And you are, even like you were saying, like you're talking to you're talking to the athlete in the gym, and here you're talking to the dad. You're talking to dads across the country. You have a huge Instagram following. Like you are speaking directly to dads. So I want to hear how Forfeit Fatherhood came about. And then I would love to do a deep dive into the 4 pillars: the faith, family, finance, and fitness.
Yeah. So Forfeit Fatherhood started 2018, kind of started dabbling in it, right? Just, I mean, honestly, it started before that. It started in 2012 when my daughter was born, right? It started with me
Yeah.
having conversations with other dads, right? Because I felt like I had read the baby books. I had kind of done that thing. I did some Google searches and tried to find out stuff about fatherhood, right? But most of it is like, what to expect when you're expecting. It's mostly talking about mom, right? Or what mom's going through, or what maybe
Yeah.
baby is going through, but none of it's really talking about what dad is going through. And I had 2 dads, but both of them, like most men, don't talk about that stuff, right? Like they can tell you I told you so later on, or oh man, you should have asked me. But I'm like, dog, you should have told me. But
Right.
guys
Right.
just aren't out there sharing their experiences in fatherhood. Like you have to go dig it up. And so I started reaching out to guys that I knew that I thought were good fathers and asking questions and having these conversations. And I started to think like, if I have these questions, right, it's typical, right? When you're like in a classroom setting, one person asks a question, but like 10 people had the same question. They're just afraid to ask it.
Right.
So I started talking to
Yeah.
these guys and getting these answers, and I'm like, man, that's such good stuff. Like, I wish I could share this somehow, and I didn't know what to do with it. Right at the time,
Mm.
podcasting I don't think was big enough on my radar for me to think that was a thing. But just in my circle of friends, we just started having those conversations and talking to each other and talking about it, and so that started happening. And then I was like, this is something that maybe we can kind of turn into something bigger. And so I told my wife, you know
Yeah.
what, I think I'm going to start an Instagram page. So 2018, and this is obviously years have passed, right? So now we're talking about 2018. I start the Forfeit Fatherhood Instagram, and it is me and 5 other people, 6 other people. Like, it's crickets for a long, long time, right? I'm just talking to my
Really?
talking to myself, posting stuff that I thought was good, things that I heard, videos that I had seen, things like that, and nothing's really happening. But I'm not really doing it for that. I'm not doing it to build some great
Yeah.
following. I was just sharing information, hoping to help somebody out, right? Um, but it just kind of continued to grow from there. The more that I shared and the more that I found and the more that I researched and the more guys that I talked to, I got to a point where some of these conversations were like really good. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start a podcast. And it just like these little things just start happening where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
this thing and I'm gonna do that thing. And then like, I'm gonna try this thing and just,
Right.
just trying stuff, and some stuff working and some stuff falling flat on his face. And but just continuing to move forward, trying to help other people and help other dads be better. And then the 4 pillars part
Mm.
of it, I just feel like, and there's probably more pillars, right? As I've talked to guys, they've said other things that maybe
Yeah.
I thought that work. But when I think of stability, right? Like, we talk about a house, or you see
Mm.
like the 4 pillars. You got to hold up the corners, right? Those 4 pillars I think are most important. And then there's
Yeah.
other load bearing walls that you could put in there, but you got to have those 4 pillars, right? And faith, family, finance, and fitness. The family one I think is really obvious, right? Because you're a father, and we're talking about
Yeah.
fatherhood, then family is obviously super important. It's got to be, right? Your family, your extended family, the families that are around you in your community, um, the family of fathers that you create, that support you, that push you, that encourage you. That's really important, right? Your faith. And it's not
Yeah.
any specific faith. I'm Christian. I've had spoken to guys that are Muslim, guys that are Hindu, guys that are a bunch of different religions, right? But your faith provides you with some guiding principles, right? Like, what you believe in, or,
Mm.
or don't believe in, however you phrase it, provides you with some guiding principles or some things that you align yourself with as a man and as a person that kind of help you guide and lead your family, right? So that's obviously important,
Yeah.
right? Finance, kids are expensive, right? Like, let's be real, kids cost money. And providing for them all the things that they need or want, or all, trying to do all the stuff that I think a lot of times we go, well, I didn't have this as a kid, I want to make sure my kids have it, right? And that's finance a lot of times, and sometimes it's emotional, but a lot of times it's finance related, right? And so we've got to figure out how to be
Yeah.
financially savvy, right? So have some intelligence around financial literacy. And then fitness is one of those things where, like, I think it's a foundational piece. And I say this because I'm a father. I really love being a father, right? Now, if I want to be a father for a long period of time, I've got to be physically fit. I'm not talking about being a bodybuilder. I'm not talking about being a competitive
Yeah.
athlete, but the the more fit I am, without any kind of, you know, crazy diseases or one-offs, I get to live longer. I get to be a father for as long as possible,
Yeah.
right? So I not only get to be a father, but I get that golden transition. I get to be grandfather and maybe great grandfather. And if you love fatherhood as much as I love
Mm.
fatherhood, I want to be great granddad. Like, I want to be the guy where they come over for Christmas and I'm in my chair. I can still move around, but I got my chair, and everybody come, the kids sit around me and I tell them stories about how I used to walk uphill 10 miles in the snow to get to school. Or
Both ways. Yeah.
yeah, no, and I've got like cool little sayings and things that I say where they can be like, my granddad used to say such and such. So the fitness piece is super important because a lot of us
Yeah.
are just not nailing that piece as well as we could. And so we're leaving
Mm.
fatherhood on the table, right? Like we only get a certain amount of years of fatherhood. You, as a father, you are infinite, right? You're always somebody's father, but to physically be present, you
Mm.
only get a certain amount of years of that, right? And if we aren't taking care of our fitness, we're leaving fatherhood on the table. And so the fitness piece is, I think,
Yeah.
really important. Now, just depending on where you are in life, any one of those four things may be more important than the other. And so I don't really rank them, right? It's not like a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's
Hmm.
just these are the four
Okay.
corners, right? One side might need more support at one point, the other might need some more support at another point, or you might be kind of holding up two sides. I think of it maybe more like a Venn diagram, right? There's these four circles, but that
Yeah.
sweet spot where all four circles cross is where you kind of get the most out of it.
Yeah. I'd love to, if you can, I'm putting you on the spot here, but for maybe somebody who's listening right now, who it resonates, like, yes, I know I need those four. Give us this, what I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's someone's next best step to initiate something in each of those categories. You know what I mean? And again, that could be, maybe it's too obvious, but I think a lot of times it's just that startup for somebody like, I don't know what the heck to do. Yes, I know I need to be fit. Yes, I know I need to focus on family and faith, finance. What would be the next best step in each of those categories? And again, I know I'm putting you on the spot
No,
here.
you're good. I think a couple of things have to happen. I think one, I think what you're talking about is self awareness, and that's a great first step. Is number one to be self aware, to know what you need and what you want. A lot of times we have a feeling of there's more, but we don't know what that means, right? Like we could be more, we could do more, but we don't want to know what
Yeah.
that means, and that's in some parts because we don't know where we're at, right? And so we have to get brutally honest with ourselves. Like we have to ask those questions of financially, am I where I want to be? Let's just be
Mm.
completely honest. Don't lie to yourself. Are you where you want to be financially? Are you where you want to be fitness wise? Are you where you want to be in your faith, right? Or are you where you want to be? Is your family where you want it to be? Or who you want to be for your family, right? I think once you ask that
Mm.
question, then you ask a secondary follow-up question of where am I right now? And then where do I want to be? Right. And
Mm.
it's like GPS, like Waze, right? You put when you go on the Waze, it asks you for your destination. It asks you where you want to go, right? Because your GPS
Yep.
location tells it where you're at right now. So that's number one. It knows where you're at right now. Then it needs to know where you need to go. From there, it gives you several different routes to choose from, right? Like if I know where I'm at right now and I
Mm.
know where I need to be, now I can kind of plot out a route to get there, right? I can kind of figure out, okay,
Yeah.
this is where I'm at right now. Let's say it's a fitness thing, right? I'm 240 pounds. I want to get down to 200 pounds. Okay. So now I know where I'm at. I know where I need to go. Okay. When do I want to get there? Like whether it's a realistic
Mm.
time frame for me to want to get to that point. Like if I say that, I'm in debt right now and I've got $100,000 in debt, I want to be financially free. I want no debt. Okay, so I got $100,000 in debt. How long do I want to work on getting that down? And then that allows me to chip away at it and create milestones. But I think what you said is really important. Is that first step? Like it's just taking the step, right? Beyond saying I know that I'm
Yeah.
not, right? I know I'm not where I need to be, right? That's great because you're starting to be aware of the problem, right? You're problem aware, but you're not solution aware yet, right? You got to get to the point where you know what the
Yeah.
solution is, and that takes some work and that takes some kind of digging into yourself and kind of laying it all bare of where you are and what you want to try to accomplish. I hope that answered the question.
It does, and I actually really like the Waze example because I imagine you get those three routes, and one of them may be fastest, but it's on the highway, and the other one may be a little more of a scenic route, but it may take a little bit longer, but it may be a better drive for you, and so you just have to determine what's important to me right now. Do I want the hectic? Do I want it to be hectic, jumping on the highway, or do I want to be a little more scenic route and take a little bit longer? So that third question I do think is super important is how long, how much time do I have for this? So I love that perspective on it as well. And I think you're right. It's just something, it's just that solution and it's the next best step. And you can't lose all 40 of those pounds now in this workout, but to your point, you can chip away at it.
Yep.
Um, and give yourself, I've found in a lot of this stuff is just giving yourself a little bit of grace too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna be here for a long time. You had a post the other day about about the next 40, what the next 40 years are like. And that's a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
you can do it. It takes, you have a lot of time to do it, but it does begin with some action today.
Yep. Yep. And then I think one thing that's
Um,
important to point out too is that you are going to run into some obstacles along the way, right? You're going to pick the path that you think is best for you right now. And then along the way, that may change, right? Like when you put in the ways, like somewhere along the way, they go, you're no longer on the fastest route, and they give you another one, right? Or you might make a wrong turn just because you're
yeah,
not paying
yeah,
attention. And you don't have to go back to the start. You just replot the path from where you're at, right? Okay, so now we need to get back on the
yeah,
freeway and do this thing, right? And I think it's important to understand that there is going to be obstacles along the way, no matter how well you prep for it, right? Like I can give you a
yeah,
perfect game plan for how to get there, but there's going to be something that neither one of us see coming, right? That neither one of us know what's coming up.
yeah,
And it's just an understanding of that is not a obstacle. It's an opportunity for you to redirect, maybe refocus, maybe reassess where you want to go. Because like we talk about, and I used to talk to guys who are entrepreneurs, and there's this big thing about like making $100,000 a year, or it's $10,000 a month, or all these kind of things, right? And guys will get to a certain amount and just feel comfortable, and like, okay, well, maybe 100,000 wasn't what you
hmm.
needed, right? Like maybe 70,000 is just a
Huh.
really sweet spot for you, because to get to 100,000, you're gonna have to dedicate this much X amount of time and X amount of extra effort, and like 70,000, you're really comfortable. Like life is sweet, right? Everything is going the way you want it. So maybe we don't need to push
Right.
so hard, right? Not to say that you settle, but like you found out that the goal you thought was a
Yeah.
goal really wasn't the goal. It was an idea, but you hit the goal along the way.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. I want to close with a question about leadership in the home for dads. We've noticed at Aro that a lot of times dads will defer over to their wives on stuff. And by the way, I think that people say like, oh, you got to be the leader of the home. No, you got two leaders of the home. Like everybody has a leadership role in the home, but I do think that I do notice that recognize a little bit of passivity sometimes in some dads, or a little bit of being too deferential and not taking on their role of leadership. Will you speak generally about the role of leadership, and maybe what guys who are listening, or I bet you there are some women listening right now who want to send this to their husbands. And so what is that message you want dads to hear right now of being leaders in their homes?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about like, not having like my dad didn't give me a bunch of fatherhood advice before me being a father. But when we did have our first daughter, it was one thing that I remember and I always think about it, is that he told me there's going to come a time where your daughter's coming at, well, my daughter, there was no S at that time, where she comes to ask you something,
Mm-hmm.
and don't be the guy that says, go ask your mom, because that only needs to
Mm.
happen a couple of times before she stops asking you altogether.
Wow.
So if you defer to her, and that's fine. I think a lot of times we defer because mom just has a better grasp. She just knows the schedule. You know what I mean? Like mommy knows what's going on. Like I'm just
Right.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
floating through, and she's telling me what to do. So don't ask me, go ask your mom, right? Um, but
Right.
but I think when you do that too often, you unseat yourself, right? You take your own leadership out of the
Oh.
picture, because you're now saying to the person who's looking to you for leadership that, well, I don't know, like I'm a follower just like you, so just go ask the leader. So I think a couple things have to
Hmm.
happen. One, we've got to do a better job of being involved completely in our household. I've That's something that I've definitely had to work on, because for a long time, like I just said it just now, like my wife, she schedules stuff, right? Like she plans things out, and we
Yeah.
talk about our schedule on a weekly basis, but she has certain family stuff that she just plans, and I'm like, okay, all right, just let me know when. um but I've had to get really active in my own personal calendar, right? Like everything that happens in the family is on my calendar, just like everything that happens in work is on my calendar. Like I'm very very
Right.
intentional about my time, because I want to know how I can best show up for whatever is on the schedule, right? Like if I don't know that it's on the schedule, then I can't be as effective as I need to be, right? And for a lot of us, we just, we take our quote unquote P's, right? Our provide, protect, preside in some situations, right? We take those and, okay, I'm just going to go provide. That's my job as a dad. I'm a provider, right? Or my job as a dad
Yeah.
is I'm a protector. But there's another
Mm.
P that we miss out on a lot, and that's just being present, right? Like present and available is
Wow.
huge, right? And I would think, obviously you have to have
Yeah.
a house and, a roof over your head and food in your mouth and clothes on your back, and that provision part of it. And you got to protect your family from the wilds of the world. But a lot of people could do that, right? A lot of things can do that. Not everyone can
Yeah.
be present in the way that you can be present, right? Matter of fact, I'd argue that only one
Mm.
person can be present in the way that you could be present, and that's you. So to
Yeah.
sacrifice that presence for those things that could, like, if we put a gate up around the house, well, then not a lot of things are going to get in. So that takes care of my protection part, right? Like if my
Yeah.
wife has a really good job and she can pay the bills and provide food on the table, well, then you don't need me to be a provider. But she can't be present in the way that I can be present, right? That gate can't be
Right.
present in the way that I can be present. Only I can do that. And I think we miss that as men and as dads, and that's a huge part of leadership, is being present with the people that follow you, right? It endears them to you. It makes them want to follow you. And the way for us to do that is to have an understanding of what's going on in our household and not just zone out, right? Like go to work, make money, come home and watch ESPN until we fall asleep and start all over.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we have to be present
Yeah.
in every way possible whenever we can, early and often.
Man, that's good. It's totally right, and you're right. It is very easy because very often the mom, she is the manager of the household, but that doesn't mean you can't be involved in it. That doesn't mean you can't. That doesn't mean you have to wait for her to tell you what to do next. That you can take action over that, even if she may be the overseer of that, you can still take action in that. And you can still do your part. And this is where I'm bad. Maybe I can. If we're going to go to the beach, maybe I can pack some towels instead of waiting her just because she's the manager. That doesn't mean that I can't involve myself in that process as well and take an active role, because so I have a son and a daughter. So then my son sees, oh, this is what you do. Yeah, mom manages that, but dad is also taking a leadership role in that, in being helpful towards it. And then my daughter will then see, oh, this is what I should expect someday when I get married. I should expect my husband to do what my dad has done. And you're so right. And presence is more than just, it's more than just like being attentive. It is like contributing as well. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of different facets to presence that you touched on there.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Man, that's good. Rod, I'll say this, man. I'm just grateful and appreciative for the message that you are speaking. I think that the message that you have is more powerful because of your track record, because you live it out, because you are an athlete, because you have had a successful career, because you're using your platform, you're using your voice on a large platform, and because you have the credibility to do it. And I'm just grateful to you for speaking to dads, because we all need it. Even from the most involved to the least involved of us, we all need some sharpening. And the great thing about you can sometimes dads need to get in our, we need somebody to get in our faces every now and then. Yeah. But do it in a reaffirming, like you can do it also. So I just grateful for your voice in talking to dads, and for your message in helping point them towards those four things to hold up the house and keep you stable. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Because I really, really enjoy what you're doing as well. Like, I think the fatherhood space needs so many different voices, and so many different, like, because it is such a big thing, right? Being a father is such a big thing. Like, we try to narrow
Yeah.
it down to like one role for us, or like one thing that we do, but it's like all
Yeah.
encompassing, right? And there's so many different perspectives and so many different things that you need to hear, and some of them you're not going to agree with, right? Some of them it's like, I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hear it and I'm gonna move past it. But even in that situation, it strengthens what you believe, right? And so I thank
Yeah.
you. I thank you for what you're doing as well, man. It's nice to, it's
Appreciate it.
refreshing to have another voice out there that's encouraging men and fathers to show up as the full version of themselves, to not be the typical sitcom dad, the goofball to pull my
Yeah.
finger,
Right.
to sit on the couch, Al Bundy, kind of guy. It's just like the
Right.
really not the 70s show. It was funny. It's like Red on the 70s show was like a hard guy,
Yeah.
but then there's also like parts of him that were loving,
Yeah.
that they don't show. But like even
Mm.
in that, there's so much to a character. There's so much to a dad, that we need more guys expressing that is a thing, right? You're not just a stoic like
Yeah.
figure in the house. Like you can be emotionally present, and you can be physically present, and you can be the tough guy. Like you can do that, right? You don't have to be,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be bad cop all the time. Like bad cop has to play good cop sometime.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Rod, where tell people, we'll put this in the show notes as well, but website, Instagram handle, give us all the ways that people can connect with you.
Yeah, I think the obviously where I'm the most active is on Instagram. The Instagram handle is 4Fit Fatherhood, the number 4Fit Fatherhood. It's the same on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter that often. I was, but I've really focused all my attention on Instagram. So if you want to reach out, that's the best way to do it. The email is the same, 4Fit Fatherhood, the number 4. Website, the same, 4Fit Fatherhood, the number 4.
Yeah.
Try to line everything up to make it really easy. My personal coaching page, web page anyway, is You Can Call Me Coach. Like I mentioned to you earlier, with my name, I get Rob, I get Roderick, I get Roderick, I get all these different things. And what seems to work, what seems to work best is I have my athletes and the guys that I work with, they just call me Coach, right? So the website is youcancallmecoach.com.
I love it.
Just because it's simple,
Yeah. Well, everybody, I will say this, I mean, it's 4Fit Fatherhood is a must follow on Instagram. It's original and curated content, and it's so between the eyes. It's awesome. So everybody go follow 4Fit Fatherhood. Rod, thank you. Or Roderick. It's going to be hard for me not to call you Roderick from now on. That's really good. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for coming on the Aro Podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.